5 minutes ago, everything changed. A sealed royal document hidden for decades was opened in private, and what King Charles read inside left him visibly shaken. The clause, written in the Queen's own hand, didn't just alter a procedure, it bypassed him entirely. No consultation, no warning, no gradual transition. Instead, it pointed directly to one name, Prince William. And the implications are nothing short of seismic. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The discovery did not unfold during ceremony or public ritual. It happened quietly, behind closed doors, during what was meant to be a routine archival review tied to the Queen's final administrative settlements. The document had been catalogued, sealed, and secured under sovereign authority, protected by layers of discretion that only a handful of senior officials even knew existed. When the envelope was presented, there was no sense of impending shock, only procedure. But the moment the wax was broken and the final page unfolded, the room shifted. Charles read the lines once, then again, silence stretched. His expression did not explode in anger, it fractured in disbelief. For a man who had waited a lifetime to carry the full weight of the crown, the realization was not loud, it was destabilizing. The clause itself was unmistakably deliberate. It did not remove him from the throne. It did not challenge his title. Instead, it redirected specific sovereign powers under defined circumstances, powers tied to long-term strategic governance, constitutional safeguards, and international representation directly to William, not temporarily, not symbolically. Structurally, it created a parallel channel of authority that could activate without Charles's approval. That was the sting. Authority, once assumed indivisible, had been carefully divided before he ever ascended, and the ink bore the Queen's unmistakable precision. Royal clauses are not unheard of. Throughout history, monarchs have inserted private contingencies to protect continuity during instability. Addendums, sealed instructions, letters of direction, these are the quiet instruments of power, rarely discussed beyond palace walls. But those instruments typically preserve the sovereign's authority, not bypass it. This clause did something far more unsettling. It anticipated a moment when the crown itself might require insulation from uncertainty, from miscalculation, perhaps even from internal vulnerability. And in that anticipation, the Queen had drawn a line that curved past her son and settled firmly on her grandson. Why was it never disclosed? Because disclosure would have sparked speculation, and speculation breeds fracture. The Queen understood optics better than anyone. Revealing such a safeguard during her lifetime would have humiliated Charles before he even wore the crown. So it remained sealed, waiting quiet, patient, dormant, until now. And as the implications rippled outward, senior advisors were summoned. Legal experts were consulted under strict confidentiality. Communications teams prepared contingency responses in case word leaked. The atmosphere inside the palace was not chaotic, but it was charged. Every conversation carried the same unspoken realization. This was not an oversight. It was intentional settling. Still was the timing. The clause had not surfaced randomly. Administrative triggers had activated its review, suggesting that conditions outlined within its language had quietly aligned. That detail alone deepened the tension. If the Queen had built a safeguard, then she had also anticipated the possibility of needing it. And if those conditions were now met, what had shifted inside the monarchy to justify its emergence? Charles was not confronting rebellion. He was confronting foresight, and foresight, when it bypasses you, feels like judgment. For now, the document remains contained within a tight circle of awareness. But awareness is expanding. William has not spoken. Charles has not responded publicly, yet something fundamental has moved beneath the surface of royal authority. This was not merely a clause. It was a signal, one written long ago, preserved in silence, and revealed at a moment that feels anything but accidental. And as the weight of that revelation settles over the crown, one question presses harder than any other. But what exactly did the Queen foresee that made her draft such a clause, and why was it hidden until now? Royal power isn't just inherited, it's engineered. And deep within the monarchy's foundation lie documents never meant for public consumption. The Queen, known for precision and patience, quietly reshaped the architecture of succession in her final years. But this clause wasn't about death or transition. It was about control, and in doing so, she may have rewritten the balance of authority without ever announcing it. The monarchy survives not only through ceremony, but through quiet design. Beneath the glittering surface of state occasions and public declarations sits a framework of private directives, sealed instructions, and sovereign contingencies that only a select few ever glimpse. These are not dramatic decrees delivered from balconies. They are calculated safeguards, drafted in careful language, built to activate only when necessary. The clause Charles encountered belongs to that hidden tradition, yet it goes further than tradition typically allows. It does not merely guide, it redirects. It creates a structural bypass, subtle but unmistakable, shifting certain decision-making else toward William under defined circumstances. That level of recalibration does not happen impulsively. It reflects intent forged over time. In her final decade, the Queen was often described as steady, measured, unshakable, but steadiness should never be mistaken for passivity. Those closest to her understood that she absorbed information, constantly political undercurrents, public sentiment, internal disagreements. Reports flowed to her daily. Briefings layered upon briefings, and in those quiet assessments, she saw patterns forming. Alleged tensions between Charles and senior advisors were never publicly explosive, but they existed in whispers, differences in pace, in tone, in strategic emphasis. Charles favored bold initiatives, outspoken environmental advocacy, and reformist ideas. Some advisors worried about timing, others feared missteps. None of it reached open confrontation, yet the Queen would have noticed every ripple. At the same time, William's responsibilities expanded steadily. He was not merely attending engagements. He was participating in strategic councils, representing the Crown in sensitive diplomatic moments, and quietly building credibility with institutions that value continuity over charisma. It did not look like acceleration. It looked like preparation, and perhaps that is precisely what it was. The Queen's clause reads less like favoritism and more like contingency planning and insurance policy drafted not against her son, but against instability itself. Its language suggests activation tied to defined triggers, moments when confidence in centralized authority might require reinforcement rather than confrontation. Inside palace corridors, insiders now whisper about prepared alternatives, not rebellion, not replacement. Alternatives, a structure that ensures the monarchy can pivot without appearing fractured. The genius and the cruelty of such design is that it preserves the crown even if it unsettles the king. Charles may sit upon the throne, but certain strategic levers can shift elsewhere if predefined conditions align. That alignment is what makes the present moment so unsettling. Because if the clause has surfaced, then the Queen's long-anticipated scenario may no longer be theoretical, and this reframes everything. The narrative is no longer about a shocked monarch discovering an unexpected document. It becomes a story about foresight versus assumption, stability versus pride. The Queen did not merely plan for succession, she planned for resilience. She anticipated that power must sometimes be buffered to protect itself. That realization transforms the clause from a personal slight into a constitutional strategy, yet personal emotion does not disappear simply because strategy exists. Charles must now reconcile his authority with a safeguard written long before he wore the crown. The deeper question lingers, heavier than ever. If the Queen engineered this contingency with such precision, she must have believed circumstances could demand it. She must have foreseen pressures building, fractures widening, vulnerabilities emerging. And if stability was her goal, then what did she see coming that made her bypass her own son? Behind palace smiles lies a quiet, generational tension. Charles waited a lifetime for the crown. William never asked for acceleration, yet in one clause, the Queen shifted symbolic gravity toward her grandson. Was this protection or preparation? For years, insiders noted subtle shifts, William stepping forward while Charles hesitated. But this document didn't suggest partnership. It suggested preference. For Charles, The journey to the throne was not swift or simple. It was a 70-year apprenticeship under the shadow of an unshakable sovereign. He learned patience not as virtue, but as necessity. Every speech was measured, every initiative filtered through the understanding that his moment would come, but not yet. He endured public scrutiny, private doubts, and decades of waiting while preparing to lead an institution older than memory. When the crown finally settled upon him, it carried the weight of sacrifice. And now, in a single clause, that hard-earned centrality feels subtly displaced. William's path unfolded differently. He did not wait in suspended ambition. He matured under relentless visibility. From a young age, he absorbed expectation without complaint, building a reputation that blended restraint with approachability. Over the past decade, his role quietly expanded. He chaired initiatives, engaged global leaders, and positioned himself as both modern and steady. It was not a rebellion against his father, it was evolution. Yet evolution inside a monarchy can feel like acceleration to those who waited longest. And when the Queen's clause aligned key authority with William under specific conditions, it formalized what many had already sensed: a gradual shift in symbolic momentum. Private disagreements over modernization only deepened that undercurrent. Charles has long championed reform, streamlining the monarchy, speaking candidly on environmental issues, reshaping public engagement. Some praised his vision, others questioned its timing. William, by contrast, projected balance. He embraced change without provoking unease, aligning tradition with contemporary relevance in quieter strokes. The Queen would have observed these contrasts carefully. She understood that public confidence in the monarchy rests not only on bold direction, but on emotional stability. If she perceived friction between ambition and caution, she may have chosen the figure who embodied steadiness during uncertain currents. The emotional sting, however, cannot be reduced to strategy. For Charles, this is not merely constitutional nuance, it is maternal bypass. The realization that his mother anticipated circumstances in which authority would flow past him strikes deeper than policy. It touches identity. It challenges the assumption that lifelong preparation guarantees unqualified trust. Even if the clause exists as safeguard rather than judgment, perception does not easily separate the two, and perception, within royal life, shapes legacy. Beside William stands Catherine, whose influence cannot be ignored. Calm, deliberate, and fiercely protective of the institution's future, she has strengthened his public image with consistency rather than spectacle. Together, they represent renewal without rupture. Their partnership projects continuity that feels reassuring to a modern audience. In contrast, Charles's reign began under immediate pressure, navigating expectation, comparison, and inherited tension. The clause now amplifies that contrast, placing psychological weight upon him at a moment when unity is essential. This unfolding drama is not about rivalry in the crude sense. It is about legacy, how it is shaped, protected, and sometimes redirected. The Queen's final maneuver reframes the narrative of succession into something more intricate than lineage. It suggests she saw the monarchy's future as a delicate balance between experience and perception, authority and acceptance. And in tipping that balance subtly toward her grandson, under defined circumstances, she may have been protecting not an individual, but an era, because legacy inside the monarchy is never accidental, and the Queen's final decisions were anything but impulsive. The Queen rarely moved without foresight. In her final months, she made subtle yet decisive adjustments, appointments, meetings, sealed correspondences. At the time, they appeared routine. Now they read like preparation. The clause wasn't scribbled in haste. It was structured, witnessed, and protected. And its wording leaves no ambiguity. In certain matters, William, not Charles, holds final authority. To understand the magnitude of that decision, we have to return to the final stretch of her reign, when public appearances grew fewer but private consultations intensified. Those who observed closely noticed a pattern. Senior constitutional advisors were summoned with unusual frequency. Legal drafts circulated under strict confidentiality. Trusted aides were instructed to catalogue and secure documents under sovereign seal. None of it sparked alarm then. It seemed like prudent housekeeping by a monarch approaching transition. But in hindsight, those months now resemble strategic choreography, each movement designed to secure the monarchy beyond her lifetime. The clause itself, according to insiders, was drafted not at the very end, but several years prior, revised carefully over time. That detail changes everything. It suggests this was not a reaction to a sudden event, but the culmination of prolonged evaluation. The Queen had decades of experience navigating political storms, public opinion shifts, and internal disagreements. She knew that stability depends not on sentiment, but on structure. By the time her health declined, the framework was already in place. All that remained was preservation, ensuring the language was airtight, the witnesses discreet, and the activation parameters precise. Those entrusted with safeguarding the document were not chosen lightly. They were individuals whose loyalty had been tested across administrations, figures who understood the gravity of constitutional nuance. Their silence over the years was not merely obedience, it was recognition that disclosure would fracture perception. Because the clause did not remove Charles, but it did anticipate limits. It reassigned specific strategic powers, long-term institutional decisions, certain international representations, crisis response authority to William under defined conditions. It created a stabilizing counterweight, subtle yet profound. Why would she do that? The answer may lie in perception. The Queen understood that monarchy rests on confidence. If public faith wavers, even briefly, the damage can linger. She watched generational expectations evolve. She observed the media climate grow more volatile. She likely recognized that William embodied continuity in a way that reassured younger audiences without alienating traditionalists. That does not diminish Charles's preparation or dedication, but it highlights a hard truth. Leadership is not only about readiness, it is about resonance. Behind closed doors, William's preparation intensified. Meetings that once seemed observational became participatory. Briefings expanded in scope. He was exposed to sensitive intelligence and constitutional complexities long before the public realized the depth of his involvement. It was quiet training, devoid of fanfare, a future being shaped discreetly while maintaining outward unity. The Queen was not grooming a rival. She was fortifying a safeguard, and yet the clause remained sealed, dormant, almost forgotten by those outside the inner circle. It waited. Waiting suggests expectation. Activation requires conditions, which means that its emergence now is not accidental. Something aligned with the parameters she anticipated, a scenario she foresaw, a vulnerability she prepared for. The revelation that Charles encountered was not merely archival, it was triggered. And triggers imply cause. The unsettling implication is that the Queen believed such a moment could arise, that she trusted her foresight enough to formalize it, that she anticipated a crossroads where continuity might demand reinforcement beyond tradition. And if the clause has now been brought into play, then the conditions she once feared may no longer be hypothetical, and that trigger may reveal more about the present crisis than anyone expected. Clauses don't activate themselves. Something happened, something significant enough to unlock the Queen's contingency. Was it political pressure, internal division, a strategic misstep? Palace corridors buzzed tonight with theories, but one fact remains. This clause didn't surface by accident, and the timing suggests urgency, not ceremony. Inside the monarchy, activation is never random. It requires alignment conditions quietly met, thresholds discreetly crossed. The Queen's safeguard was constructed with precision, meaning its emergence now signals more than archival housekeeping. It signals movement beneath the surface. In recent months, subtle tremors have unsettled the palace foundation. Whispers of disagreement over strategic direction grew sharper. Advisors reportedly urged caution on decisions they feared might ripple beyond control. Charles, determined to shape his reign boldly, pressed forward with initiatives that reflected conviction. Yet conviction can appear risky when stability is fragile. The tension did not explode publicly, it accumulated privately. Senior courtiers protective of the institution above any individual began discussing the optics of uncertainty. Stability, they argued, is the monarchy's lifeblood. Even the perception of division can weaken its authority. Some insiders quietly reference the Queen's contingency framework, an insurance mechanism long sealed but not forgotten. The suggestion alone reveals how deeply her foresight was embedded within palace thinking. It wasn't a rebellion against the king, it was a reflex to preserve the crown. William's recent private engagements add another layer of intrigue. He has met with figures traditionally reserved for sovereign consultation. He has been briefed on matters typically confined to the reigning monarch's inner circle. Officially, these interactions appear routine, part of his role as heir. Unofficially, they suggest preparedness. It is as if the architecture the Queen drafted years ago is now being tested in real time. That testing may have been triggered by concern over international perception, domestic confidence, or strategic coherence. Charles' decisions, some viewed as assertive and others as polarizing, have drawn mixed reactions beyond palace walls. His desire to modernize, to speak openly on issues close to his heart, distinguishes him from his predecessors' measured neutrality. Admirers see courage, critics see vulnerability. The Queen understood that perception shapes legitimacy. If global partners begin to sense inconsistency at the monarchy's core, diplomatic equilibrium could tilt. A divided image, even subtly, can echo loudly across continents. Then there is the silence. The media blackout has been swift and controlled, briefings carefully worded, questions deflected. When institutions clamp down this tightly, it signals gravity. Palace communications teams are not reacting to gossip. They are containing shockwaves. The clause's activation, though not publicly acknowledged, has triggered internal recalibration. Strategies are being reviewed, roles are being reconsidered, and beneath the composure, urgency hums. The unsettling truth is that contingency implies anticipation. The Queen did not draft her safeguard idly. She expected that one day, circumstances might demand reinforcement. If that reinforcement is now engaged, then the monarchy may be navigating a crossroads more precarious than publicly admitted. Authority remains with Charles, but a parallel channel has awakened. Two centers of gravity, subtle yet undeniable. Dual shadows stretching across the same institution, and shadows alter perception. If the monarchy now operates under layered authority, formal and contingent, the balance becomes delicate. Every decision carries amplified meaning. Every public appearance becomes symbolic. Stability must be projected without revealing strain. Yet strain, once present, rarely vanishes quietly. And while Charles processes the shock, William finds himself standing in a position he never publicly claimed, but may now be forced to accept. Prince William did not ask for this moment, but history rarely waits for comfort. As the clause's implications spread quietly among senior officials, eyes turned toward him not as heir, but as active authority. The burden is immense, the symbolism is louder, and the silence from Kensington speaks volumes. For years, William's trajectory was defined by patience. He prepared without appearing impatient. He supported without overshadowing. His role was clear. Stand beside the sovereign, learn the weight of the crown, and wait for time to unfold naturally. But the Queen's clause has disrupted that rhythm. It does not place a crown upon his head, yet it positions him in a space that feels uncomfortably close to command. The distinction is subtle on paper and seismic in practice. He is no longer only the future. Under specific conditions, he becomes the safeguard of the present. Internally, that shift carries conflict. Loyalty to his father runs deep. The monarchy is built on continuity, not competition. William understands that any visible assertion of authority could be misinterpreted as ambition, and ambition, even when unintended, can fracture trust. He now stands in a delicate positive. Ion empowered yet restrained, elevated yet cautious. To act too boldly risks appearing opportunistic. To withdraw risks undermining the very stability the clause was designed to protect. The tension is not public, but it is profound. Catherine's presence has become more significant than ever. She has long embodied steadiness, balancing modern approachability with quiet respect for tradition. In moments of institutional strain, that composure becomes an anchor, Together, they project unity without aggression, readiness without restlessness. Observers note that her influence tempers urgency, ensuring that William's response remains measured rather than reactive. In this evolving dynamic, she is not merely a supportive partner, she is a stabilizing force in a shifting hierarchy. Public perception has already begun to adjust. Conversations once centered on succession timelines now revolve around preparedness. Commentators speak of continuity. Social discourse subtly shifts from speculation about the distant future to evaluation of present capability. William's approval ratings, already strong, take on new meaning. He is no longer simply admired as the next monarch. He is assessed as a contingency authority. That shift alters expectations instantly. Yet from his team there is silence, no statements, no clarifications, no celebratory signals. That silence is strategic. It avoids inflaming tension. It preserves respect for the reigning king. It also reflects an understanding that legitimacy must never appear self-claimed. The clause may grant conditional authority, but acceptance must be earned through restraint. William's challenge is to embody strength without casting a shadow over his father's reign. The broader implication is more complex. The monarchy now appears to operate under dual legitimacy, formal sovereignty, resting with Charles, conditional reinforcement resting with William. It is a structure designed for resilience, yet it introduces psychological strain. Two centers of gravity within one institution demand careful choreography. If handled with unity, it could signal unprecedented adaptability. If mishandled, it could expose vulnerability. And that is the unspoken fear, because once a contingency is activated, it rarely returns quietly to dormancy. The existence of the clause has altered perception irreversibly. Even if never invoked again, it lingers in the institutional memory. It reframes authority, it redefines succession. It suggests that the Queen's vision extended beyond ceremony into structural recalibration. This shift, subtle yet monumental, may not be temporary. It may represent the beginning of a new Model 1, where the heir shares stabilizing responsibility before formal transition. And if that is true, the monarchy stands at the edge of transformation. But permanence in monarchy depends on one thing: how the reigning king responds. For a king who waited 70 years to ascend, this revelation cuts deep. Charles is not just a monarch, he is a son confronting his mother's final judgment. Does he resist? Does he reinterpret? Or does he quietly accept that the crown's future may no longer center on him? Tonight, behind palace doors, the weight of that decision presses heavily. Power can insulate, but it can also isolate. Since the clause surfaced, those closest to Charles have noticed a subtle withdrawal, not theatrical anger, not public outrage, something quieter, a heaviness. He has spent a lifetime preparing to lead, studying constitutional nuance, shaping long-term visions, imagining the legacy he would carve once the waiting ended. And now, at the very moment he stands at the pinnacle, he must grapple with the knowledge that his mother anticipated circumstances requiring reinforcement beyond him. That ion is deeply personal. It touches pride, identity, and trust all at once. Conversations with his closest confidants have reportedly stretched long into private hours. Legal advisors explain the structural limits. Communication strategists outline potential narratives. Trusted friends urge composure. But advice cannot soften the emotional core of this moment. Charles must decide how to interpret the clause, not merely as a constitutional instrument, but as a message. Was it protection for him, shielding him from overwhelming strain? Or was it correction, a quiet adjustment born from doubt? That ambiguity fuels the turmoil. The tension between pride and duty now defines his internal landscape. Pride insists that sovereignty should be indivisible, that the king, once crowned, embodies final authority. Duty, however, whispers a harsher truth. The monarchy's survival outweighs individual ego. Charles has always spoken of service above self. Now that principle is tested in its purest form. Can he publicly affirm unity while privately wrestling with displacement? Can he transform perceived bypass into shared stewardship without revealing fracture? History offers uncomfortable parallels. There have been sovereigns whose authority was quietly constrained by regents, councils, or strategic compromises. None welcomed it. Each faced the painful contrast between title and influence. Charles is not formally sidelined, yet the presence of a conditional counterweight creates psychological pressure that feels eerily similar. The crown rests on his head, but the architecture beneath it now contains reinforcement he did not design. If the clause becomes public knowledge, reaction could be volatile. Some would praise the Queen's foresight, others would question the stability of Charles's reign. Media narratives thrive on division. Even the faint suggestion of rivalry between father and son could erode confidence. The danger is not immediate collapse, it is gradual perception shift. Monarchy depends on unity as much as ceremony. Visible strain, even subtle, invites speculation that can spiral beyond control. Charles understands this instinctively. He has spent decades watching how small fissures can widen under scrutiny. That awareness intensifies his solitude. Every decision he makes now carries dual consequence, personal and institutional. He must balance dignity with resilience, humility with authority, and somewhere within that balancing act lies his legacy. Will he be remembered as the king who resisted his mother's contingency, or the one who embraced it to preserve continuity? The air inside the palace feels charged with anticipation. Advisors wait, William remains publicly restrained, Catherine maintains calm. The nation watches unknowingly, sensing change without grasping its shape. Charles stands at a crossroads where emotion and responsibility collide. And though no announcement has yet been made, the silence itself is heavy with implication. A response is forming, not impulsive, not reckless, deliberate, and when that response arrives, it may define the monarchy's next century. This was never just about a clause. It was about control, continuity, and survival. The Queen's final maneuver may have ensured stability, but at the cost of royal harmony. As whispers grow louder and speculation spreads, one truth stands firm: the monarchy has shifted, and the shift cannot be undone. What began as a sealed paragraph has evolved into a defining moment for the crown itself. The precedent is profound. For generations, succession flowed in a straight, unbroken line authority, transferring cleanly from sovereign to heir at the moment fate demanded. Now, that line has been quietly curved. The existence of a bypass mechanism introduces a new reality. Sovereignty can be structurally reinforced before transition ever occurs. That idea alone reshapes how future monarchs will be viewed, not merely as singular pillars of power, but as part of a layered design built for resilience. In the long term, this may alter the rhythm of succession entirely. Future heirs could be prepared not only for eventual ascension, but for conditional participation in governance long before the crown rests upon their heads. The monarchy, often criticized for rigidity, may be revealing an unexpected capacity for adaptation. Yet adaptation always carries risk. If authority becomes shared too visibly, unity may appear diluted. If handled with grace, it signals evolution. If mishandled, it hints at fracture. The Queen's fingerprint on this transformation is unmistakable. Even in absence, her strategy dominates the present. She anticipated a world where perception shifts rapidly, where institutions are scrutinized relentlessly, and where generational expectations can destabilize centuries-old structures overnight. Her clause was not an emotional gesture, it was architectural foresight. It ensured that if confidence wavered, reinforcement stood ready. In doing so, she extended her influence beyond her lifetime, shaping governance from the shadows of legacy. At the center of that future stand William and Catherine, their composure, their measured tone, their balance between tradition and modern relevance. These qualities now represent continuity in uncertain terrain. They are not crowned, yet they embody assurance. For many observers, they symbolize a bridge between eras. Their presence steadies speculation, their silence maintains dignity. And whether they sought this accelerated positioning or not, they now anchor the monarchy's forward momentum. For Charles, the stakes are equally monumental. His reign will not be defined solely by policy or ceremony, it will be defined by response. How he integrates this contingency into his leadership will determine how history remembers him. If he resists, visibly, narratives of division may harden. If he embraces it as collaborative reinforcement, he may redefine kingship itself, transforming perceived slight into shared stewardship. His challenge is immense: to protect his dignity while safeguarding institutional trust. The monarchy now stands at a crossroads that feels both fragile and formidable. It can adapt, emerging stronger through layered authority, or it can fracture under the weight of pride and perception. The difference lies not in ink, but in interpretation, because at its heart, this entire upheaval circles one haunting question: was the Queen's clause an act of protection, shielding the crown from future instability? Or was it a quiet correction, a measured acknowledgement that the future required a different center of gravity? That question lingers, echoing through palace corridors and public imagination alike. The clause has been read, the balance has shifted, the response is unfolding, and whatever path emerges from this moment will ripple through decades to come, shaping how sovereignty is understood in an age that demands both continuity and courage. Because in royal history, the most powerful changes are never announced with trumpets. They are written in ink, sealed in silence, and revealed only when the throne begins to tremble. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.